Good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today for Breakfast at Blake. My name is Melissa Allen. I'm class of 1982, and I'm honored to represent the Blake Alumni Board and also the Office of Institutional Advancement, which are the sponsors of this wonderful series known as Breakfast at Blake. Well, our main speaker today is the recipient of the 2025 Young Alumna Award. And exactly. And to present that award to her, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Blake's PK through 12 Director of Visual and Performing Arts, and herself a performing artist, published author, writer, and arts education leader, Dr. Isla Raleigh.
Thank you, Melissa. And good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. I have the pleasure of presenting Blake's 2025 Young Alumna Award to Thea Traff, class of 2009. At Blake, Thea played basketball, softball, and tennis. She also studied abroad in Switzerland for a semester, and at age 16, attended a photography program at Parsons School of Design in New York City. During her senior year at Colgate University, Thea began an internship at The New Yorker, shadowing the magazine's photo editors. After college, she landed a job at the magazine as a photo editor. In 2018, she moved to Time magazine, commissioning photo portraits and directing cover shoots. That experience deepened her interest in switching from editing to shooting. In 2020, Thea made the decision to become a freelance editorial photographer. Since then, she has become known for her distinctive style of portraiture. Her work has been featured in Rolling Stone magazine, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the New Yorker, among other national publications. Her subjects include pop stars from Cyndi Lauper and Sabrina Carpenter, actors such as Tessa Thompson, Ewan McGregor, and Emma Stone, and legends like Mick Jagger, Isabella Rossellini, and Mikhail Baryshnikov. Today, we are proud to honor Thea with an award given to Blake graduates of the last 25 years. The Blake Alumna Award recognizes those who have made significant contributions to civic and professional organizations, those who are driven by a bold sense of curiosity and openness to differences, and those who constantly strive to be an engaged, courageous, and intelligent world citizen. Thea, we honor you with this citation. The Blake School recognizes Thea Traff for outstanding contributions as a creative and committed artist, for a body of work that highlights the psychological and emotional complexities of being human, and for technical and artistic excellence in editorial photography portraiture. Congratulations, Thea. It is my pleasure to present you with Blake's 2025 Young Alumna Award.
Should I hold this the whole time?
No.
Please join me in welcoming Thea Traff this morning.
Thank you, Isla. This is an enormous, enormous honor and privilege. With all of my brainstorming and goals in my career, I sincerely had Breakfast at Blake speaker at the very top of my goals, and it feels very surreal to be here and surrounded by my family and new friends and class of 2009. I come from a very long line of Blake grads. My grandmother went to Northrop, my parents went to Blake, my aunts and uncles, my brother, cousins, and it has given me so much in life. It gave me my closest friends that I'm still in touch with on a daily basis. It instilled in me such a strong work ethic, and being around such intelligent people for so many years made me a smart person and made me feel like I have a place in the rooms that I am in today with what I do. And most pertinent to today, it truly gave me my foundation in photography. Bob Teslo, sitting right here, taught me how to really see. He taught me how to really see light. He really gave me a deep love of black and white photography. And one assignment he gave me in our class one day that I have such a strong memory of is we were asked to go through newspapers at home and pick out photographs that we felt reflected the rule of thirds. And we had New York Times at home, and it's very surreal to just be here with Bob and here and with the New York Times and my photos on the front cover. Remarkably, the school has continued to be an amazing support system for me well beyond graduation, as evidenced by today, and with the help of Bill Colburn and Brian Sago. I had my first show at the Martha Bennett Gallery last year. I'm so grateful to John and also everyone at the Alumni Board. All of this work is truly a product of where I came from, and I'm so grateful to have such a deep connection today to this community. So thank you all so much for being here so early on a Thursday morning. I've spoken just a handful of times on what I do in my career, and I like to give a backstory about how I got to where I am, but in planning for today, I was reminded that most people just really want to hear what it's like to be in the room with these people. So I think I'm just going to dive into that. Oh, I meant to go to this slide. This was middle school. Classic Blake pushing people outside of their comfort zones. As sixth graders, both girls and boys were required to play tackle football. And just out here, I love this photo. So what is it like to be in the room with all of these important people? The one thing I have learned is that no matter how seasoned of an actor or person in the media someone is, they do not like having their photo taken. And when I started, that just made no sense to me, because I figured someone that is constantly in front of the camera it would make sense that they would be comfortable having their portrait taken. But I have a theory that when you're having your photo taken, at least as an actor, you're having to be yourself. You're not given a role like you are on screen. And with that, I think, comes so much vulnerability. And when you're vulnerable, I think it brings out a very interesting side of people. And sometimes that's a very kind, approachable, soft side, and other times that's a very intense, controlling, not the best side of someone. So the two words that come to mind with what I do day to day is it's incredibly exhilarating, but it's also very uncomfortable, for this reason of how vulnerable it is for someone to have their photo taken. Oftentimes they're requesting that I only photograph one side of their face, or that I'm only allowed to use a particular light. I have experienced a handful of times where someone requests that my assistant holds a full-length mirror behind me so that they're able to see what I see, which I just find to be so ridiculous. But everyone has their way of coping with how uncomfortable the experience is for them. And you never know how someone is going to be for that reason, I think. Sometimes I've gone in expecting someone to be a certain way, and it's the complete opposite. Other times it's totally aligned with my impression of who they are. Just to give a sense, too, of the uncomfortability and kind of what I'm juggling on set, I have anywhere between 2 minutes and an hour with people. It kind of averages around 20 or 30 minutes typically. And because of the tiny budgets that these magazines and newspapers now have, I'm working with real pennies, so I don't have much of a support system when it comes to all the lighting and technical aspects of these shoots. And as such, we don't really have the budget to hire big photo studios. This was a rare occasion where I was able to shoot in a proper photo studio. Typically, they're in hotel rooms or backstage in theaters, and in different spaces. And so it's really making do with making a tiny space work, which can be incredibly challenging. I also have anywhere between 5 and 25 people standing behind me. It can be hair, makeup, wardrobe, the person's publicist, their manager, the person who hired me from the newspaper, magazine, my assistant. And in this enormous time crunch, I'm trying to juggle everyone's opinions and well-being, and while trying to think about the lighting, composition, how comfortable the person in front of me is. I'm also DJing because I'm responsible for making sure the music is right on set. I'm watching the clock to make sure the countdown that I'm getting what I need. And on top of all this, there's been a recent ask to have video incorporated into what I capture, which is setting up a tripod, an entirely different way of thinking. And that's been a huge challenge. So all of this is happening, and I know that no matter what happens, the photos will be printed over 1 million times. And on Instagram, it'll be shared with, at least for the New York Times, around 20 million followers. And that's just so nerve-wracking, and again, so deeply uncomfortable. But when all of that goes well, it is exhilarating and the best feeling imaginable. I heard this quote recently that a writer said that was, and I don't know who it's attributed to, but it was, "I don't like writing, I like having written." And sometimes I feel that that's the case with photography. The second that the shoot's over, it feels so good. But the photographing process can be really hard. So there's a number of things I do to try to make a subject feel more at ease. I try to heavily research them beforehand and think about if there's anything we could connect on a personal level. I also pull a lot of reference photos of different poses and ideas so that they have some sense of what I'm envisioning, and it can give them some direction and how to channel a role and how to be and how to place their hands and what kind of tone to channel on set. It's really, really important to me that the interaction just feel as comfortable and genuine as possible. I've been on set with other photographers that are screaming like, "Beautiful, gorgeous," like, yeah, and it makes me so, it's just so cringeworthy. But I think the subject does love hearing those things, because all they want is to have a beautiful photo of them taken. But I'm just looking for a much more genuine interaction, and it is a constant dance between making them feel comfortable, though, and wanting to push them in a way that will result in a good photograph. So I'm constantly trying to dance that line and figure out how far to push them. And right now I'm kind of veering on the side of just wanting them to be comfortable, because it really just feels unfair to ask them to do things for this type of photo shoot that makes them feel like not themselves or uncomfortable with how widely the photos are distributed. This was a Ringo Starr in LA in April. And he was great. We had 30 minutes together, and he insisted on changing his outfit 6 times. And I used a strobe for this, so every time the light flared, it made a sound. And I tend to kind of rapid fire the shutter in high intensity shoots like this, because the more photos I get, the easier the editing process is on the backside. And at a certain point, he started drumming with his hands to the strobe sound, and I was just like, this is crazy. It was really fun. He was wonderful. This is an example of just shooting in a hotel room. I had to shoot on the bed. Just so awkward. But have to make do with any type of room. The shoot with Mikhail Baryshnikov I did 2 years ago, and that felt like an example of just a shoot going really well. He was so calm and demure and willing to be there, gave a full hour. The piece was about the 50th anniversary of his defection to the US, and he was really willing to move, which is always such a blessing with dancers or anyone that moves with what they do. I asked him to take off his socks because it's always nice to have bare feet in a portrait. It's kind of a thing. And he was like, after 60, he said something like, after 6 decades of dance, no one wants to see my feet. I was like, okay, you can keep your socks on. And again, I think some photographers would really push that, but I'm just want them to feel comfortable, and I'm not gonna force that. And he just was really, I had a lot of very expressive references, and he was willing to show a lot of emotion and range, and it was such a blessing to work with. It was very rare. I haven't quite had a shoot like this since. George Clooney, have to mention him. Another example of just a really nice exchange. He was so warm and engaging, and just curious, asking questions about what I do. He wanted to know who was the biggest diva I've ever worked with. Which, if this wasn't being recorded, I would share. We can talk after. This is for his Broadway debut for Good Night and Good Luck this year. So I had the idea of him playing a broadcast journalist. He was playing Edward R. Murrow, kind of like shedding a light on the truth. It's a little cheesy, but anything I can do to kind of bring in a concept really helps elevate the portraits. If I have the budget for it. This lamp was $50 to rent, so that was feasible. Stepping back a bit, I really subscribe to the concept of creativity being just the notion that creativity is about connecting things that haven't been connected before. And I once heard humor being described in a similar way. Like, humor is simply combining two things unexpectedly, and that's what's funny to us. And I find that in my work, this is exactly how I come up with new ideas, is pulling references from old photographers or painters or sculptors and incorporating that into my shoots. And I find that to be the easiest way and most effective way to come up with creative, original work. So many photographers that I work with operate the same way. And I really like this concept of just creativity being two things connected that haven't been connected before, because I think it really demystifies the idea of a genius and how we all think of really good artists as being people that just come up with ideas out of thin air and are brilliant in that way. But I really think that creativity is something that can be learned, and it's all just about building a database in your head and being able to form associations between those images, ideas in your database and what's in front of you. So when I work, I print out lots of references, just like you see here. And like I mentioned, I'm showing these references to the subjects. And that's how I then come up with fresh, new ideas on set. So here's kind of a closer look at what a reference board would look like. One example that I think illustrates this well is I had a shoot with Margaret Qualley, who for older generations, she's Andie MacDowell's daughter. She's an actress. This was for the Times last summer. And knowing that she was an actress, but she has a history of dance, and the peg for the piece was her movie The Substance, which is really dark and gritty. So I was trying to kind of come up with ways to photograph her, and I was just simply looking on Pinterest, and this photo came up. by a photographer. It was taken in the 60s, and I thought, what a cool idea to maybe photograph her and then project that image onto the wall and then re-photograph her in front of it. And hopefully she's open to moving in some way, although you can never bank on that. So the shoot was in my apartment. Again, no budget. And she was indeed open to moving, which was wonderful, and she gave a full 45 minutes. And so I photographed her, quickly downloaded the images, projected it using the projector that I used to watch movies on at my place, and then photographed her in front of it. And I was really happy with how it turned out. And then I was fully planning on it being black and white, and then I pulled the images, the raw files, into my computer and looked at the color. And that was completely unexpected, and that range from yellow to teal here was just some effect that the projector had. That was really, it just turned out really well. And again, so to go from this reference shot to where we landed just feels like an entirely different world to me, but connected, and yeah, that's really how I come up with ideas. And then of course, this was a pose that she came up with. She was kind of going like this into the light, and it made a really great effect on her eye, and that ended up being in the New York Times best photos of the year last year, which was really cool to see.
Yay!
That was another favorite from the shoot. It's maybe a little dark there. I pulled this just to show another example of how I work with references. I got to go down to Tennessee last year and photograph Post Malone, which was, I think, one of the more memorable shoots I've had. For anyone that doesn't know, he's a singer, was kind of a rapper. He's now evolved into country. And in Hollywood and just media, he's just known to be the friendliest guy ever. And he was willing to do anything. He said to me, I will literally do anything you want, just be very specific in what you're asking me to do. So you can see here the references I pulled. I'm often taking a second to pause and look back through them, which can be kind of an awkward pause, but necessary to kind of recenter myself throughout all the hecticness. He said, yes, ma'am, to every single thing I asked him to do, which was great. I wanted to have the country element in there because it was pegged to the release of his first country album. And then I learned this when I was at The New Yorker and working with such amazing journalists. I learned through the reporting process, it's important to save your biggest asks of your subjects for the very end. So I typically do that when I feel that I'm really pushing them outside of their comfort zone. I'll wait until the last minute to ask them to do that. And with him, it was taking off his shirt, which I knew he was going to be open to doing because I'd seen him photographed so often without his shirt on, but he obliged. So again, working in such limited spaces, I really have learned that a good photo can be made in any room. And it's really all about lighting. This was a shoot that I did for the New York Times Magazine 2 years ago, and I had the opportunity to go to Paris, Chile, Hawaii, Northern California twice, Washington State, all over the course of 3 weeks. And I had, in those 3 weeks, a move in New York. I was moving apartments in the middle of all that, so it was complete insanity. But I was given the assignment to go to all these places and photograph scientists that are studying elements of nature and just the world that are being impacted by climate change. So this was in Paris with a man named David Abura, who lives in Africa and studies coral there. So in this space, we were able to come up with this cover image. And of course, traveling to all these places, and really learning for the first time. This is my first cover shoot. I had forgotten about the conversion between amps for lighting. So 30 minutes before I was supposed to be here, I plugged in the light and the light bulb exploded because I had forgotten to use a converter. And so I was racing all over Paris trying to find a replacement light, and miraculously found one. And I was 30 minutes late to the shoot. And so we ended up having 20 minutes together for a cover photo. Just, again, incredibly anxiety inducing. But it worked out. And after traveling solo with the backdrop kit and this light kind of all over the world, with the challenge of creating cover-worthy portraits in these homes and office spaces, it really came together. And it's now, I think it's right upstairs, Blake. It's in Blake's collection right here, which feels amazing. This is in Chile with a scientist that studies glaciers. So I had to work with this, and we took his black jacket there and photographed this glacial ice in front of it, and that's kind of what we were able to achieve here. This was photographing a scientist who studies salmon in Northern California. It smelled awful. He sent me home with some salmon jerky. Thankfully with them, I was given ample time. I had about 2 hours, which was great. And I find that when I do have more time, sometimes I'm going into autopilot a bit. Like I have to really stay dialed in and focused to create good photography. As soon as I'm going into autopilot, I know that I'm not creating anything interesting. They didn't run this. I think they felt it was a little too literal, which I didn't see, but I liked how it looked. It's outside with his son on the right. How am I on timing? Does anyone know? 5 minutes? 5 minutes? Okay, great. So, full disclosure, I had ChatGPT help me come up with this quote. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. My experience of being in the Oval Office, I was called for this assignment less than 24 hours before I had to be in the Oval. So I was just at my apartment on a Wednesday afternoon, and the New Yorker called saying that they have a last-minute opportunity to photograph Biden. It was January of last year, and it was when they were really not letting any media into the White House and kind of trying to keep him out of the public eye. And so the way it connects to the quote is just, I had no time to prepare. There was no time to think about what my approach was going to be. I also had very little control here. I was given 10 minutes while the writer was interviewing him, so I wasn't allowed to pose him. It was high noon after an enormous winter storm, so the light was just blasting on his white hair, and you can see here, like all of the reflected light was coming through the windows, and it just was such an enormous challenge, let alone, of course, the pressure and anxiety of having 10 minutes and everything. I, for many reasons, love black and white, and for here it felt especially fitting, just thinking about light, there's a lot going on in the oval. This, I actually really love, this was taken by the press photographer, and he had such a great way of framing this room and boosting the yellow and blue, but to my eye, it felt like a black and white photo. Just a moment of him studying his notes for the interview. And for this, one thing I did do in preparation, I sent an Instacart order to my hotel when I got to DC late that night of just a piece of glass. And sometimes when I have limited creative control over a shoot, I'll try to think of ways I can shoot through things just to create some element of artfulness, because you really want it to not read like a press wire photo. So it's so subtle here, but you can see this flare of light on the left is created by shooting through a piece of glass. And it was a raw, large piece of glass that I was able to bring into the Oval Office, which I was shocked that the security did not stop me from doing that. It felt kind of crazy. And this was the select that they ended up making. Not my best photo. I wish my best photo was taken in the Oval, but that's how it goes. And then I think given the time that it ran, which was last January, when election was still prior to the election and everything, they felt that it needed to be in color, which made sense. And that was the final layout. I thought I would end with this quote. It just feels like it kind of ties in with bigger thinking and education, given where we are. It was said by a very respected Italian photographer, Paolo Pellegrin. I'll just read it. There's this Robert Capa quote, "If your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough." Very true. It always comes back to reducing or annulling distance. But that is only part of the equation. The other part is that if you're not good enough, then you're not reading enough. And the idea there is that photography is not actually about taking pictures. Taking pictures is incidental. It's a byproduct, in a sense, of everything else. What you're really doing is giving form, photographic form, to a thought, to an opinion, to an understanding of the world, of what's in front of you. And so if we think in these terms, then you have to improve the quality of your thoughts. And I find that to be so true. Yeah. Questions?
Thank you, Thea.
Hi, Jay.
Working with celebrities, which you do, of any types of celebrities, do you have a favorite in the sense of you've worked with scientists, actors, dancers? Doesn't matter. I know that you're working with individuals, but can you generalize a little bit of who you'd rather create form with to a certain degree?
Sure.
And by their profession? Just
Sure.
out of curiosity.
So to summarize, kind of, do I have a favorite type of subject to work with? Whether it be actor, scientist, dancer, politician. And I think perhaps an obvious answer, the easiest person to shoot is a dancer, because they're so comfortable in their body and they know how to move, just like those Baryshnikov photos. So I really, whenever I get a dance assignment, I'm so excited, because I know I can just channel my sense of lighting and composition and kind of let them do the work of giving me interesting forms and shapes. And I also know that they're going to be very comfortable doing their work. But I'm starting to feel more and more motivated and excited about giving exposure to people that wouldn't have the exposure otherwise. So a big like this climate series that I worked on, those scientists have never been in the newspaper, and it just felt so special and meaningful for that reason. And it required a very gentle approach because they're not used to having their photo taken. But I'm really welcoming those opportunities right now because it just feels like it has a whole nother layer of meaning to it and purpose, and they really appreciate it in the end in a way that for an actor it's just their 10th shoot of the month, and they're kind of like, what's this one? And so yeah, dancers and then anyone that isn't used to having this type of exposure are the shoots that I feel most excited about right now. Thank you.
So Thea, in the days of film, you didn't know what you had till you got to the dark room.
Yeah.
Now that you know what you have immediately, do your subjects ever ask you to see what you've got and try to manipulate, maybe that's too strong a word, affect the creative process, and do you show it to them?
Thanks, Decker. So the question is, do subjects ever ask to see the photos, or do I show them in real time, and what are the consequences of that? So typically on a photo shoot that has any decent amount of budget, you have a digital technician that has a screen like this that is showing the photos in real time as they're being taken. And I typically, again, for budget reasons, don't have this, but on this shoot, I did have the opportunity to work with someone that would be able to show the photos as that they were being taken. And it can be a blessing or a curse. Sometimes I think it really puts the subject at ease to see what I'm doing in real time. Other times, I mean, understandably, we most often don't like how we come across in photographs, so it can make them feel even more secure and cause them to go back into their shell. So I really don't like to have this on set, even though it's helpful for me to see in large format what I'm taking. It just can totally mess with your connection with the subject and how they're feeling and the whole vibe of the shoot. So yeah, and even if I don't have a screen like this, oftentimes they'll ask me to see the back of the camera, which I of course do. But yeah, it just adds a layer of complexity that I like to avoid. And sometimes there was one occasion where I showed the back of the screen, and this was a difficult one, and the publicist insisted that I delete all of the photos from that setup. And contractually, I'm not allowed to do that, and so it was a whole back and forth, and she's like, "You'll be hearing from our lawyer in the morning." I'm like, by all means, if you want to send your lawyer and say, like, we're gonna sue you for not deleting ugly photos, I would love to entertain that. So it's a whole thing, but I prefer to not have that be a part of it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was so inspiring.
Oh, good.
I'm just wondering, as a creator, I mean, your career course sounds incredible, but I would imagine there have been times that you've had setbacks or periods of discouragement, or perhaps even a shoot that has gone poorly, and I'm just wondering how you can recover from that and keep moving forward.
Yeah. So throughout my career, how have I dealt with, managed setbacks, which are of course inevitable? Given the nature of the editorial photography world being so competitive, it really feels that if you don't do well on an assignment for a magazine or newspaper, if you didn't nail that last one, they're not going to consider you another time. I think years ago when budgets are bigger and I just, even when I started at the New Yorker, I felt like the idea was that we would stick with and support the career of photographers and work with them regularly, kind of no matter what happened, within reason. So the pressure to excel on every shoot is enormous, and of course, again, given all of these huge constraints, there are many times where I walk away just feeling miserable and like I didn't get a single good frame. And so to answer your question, how am I dealing with that? Thankfully, I'm now I'm averaging about 3 shoots a week. So if one doesn't go well, I'm able to immediately jump into the next one. But it was hard in the beginning when I had to shoot maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks to have to sit in that horrible feeling for a longer period of time before the next one. So just being able to immediately jump into the next really helps. And just reminding myself again of how insane these circumstances are. Sometimes, like with the Biden shoot in the Oval, I'm just like, this is nuts. Sometimes I like to equate it to if a painter was thrown into a room on a given day, no matter what they're feeling, no matter what's in front of them, and they're expected to make a beautiful painting in 30 minutes. It's just the equivalent feels like what I'm doing. And if I fail that day or if I have a setback, I just remind myself of the extreme circumstances I'm operating under creatively, and then I'm very easily able to just let it roll off my back. So that perspective helps a lot. Yeah.
Would love to hear a little about like the approval process. Like,
Yeah.
So you send all the photos to like the New Yorker, and then do you have to, does the New Yorker like have to get it approved by their PR team, And then on the second note, you've got your own Instagram with a phenomenal following. Do you have to get approvals as well to post one of the subject itself?
Mm-hmm.
Love just kind of hear about like the approval process and the steps for that.
Yeah, thanks, Tips. So what's the approval process like for these shoots, and once I submit them, what happens? So I typically take around 1,000 photos if it's a 30-40 minute shoot, which I guess sounds like a lot. And then I'm editing them down to maybe my favorite 40, and I'll send those off to the newspaper or magazine. And with let's say, like I worked with Rolling Stone on a shoot on Friday, and I sent my favorite 40, and then they sent me their 7 selects. So then I'm given more time to take those 7 files and really perfect them in Photoshop and make sure that they're as perfect as they can be. And then I send them back, and they're ready for printing, and then the magazine handles everything. In terms of approvals with a celebrity's likeness, oftentimes the publicist will send a contract the 10 minutes before the shoot, saying that the contract will say that you're only going to use these photos in correlation with this specific article, and you're not able to use them without written consent by the publicity company otherwise. And all the photographers I know just completely dodge those emails and contracts and don't reply, and that seems to work. So they're definitely trying to get more control over the images, but I heard someone once say that for a photographer, their archive is their 401k, and so that's having these images down the road and being able to license them to other people and other magazines and outlets is my future income down the road when I'm not shooting. And so I think that's kind of generally understood, but they are relinquishing a lot of their power in having these shoots take place, because I can post them anyone I want on Instagram, and the magazine then or newspaper just has to come back to me to order more if they want to use more down the road. But it's super super liberal, and I think Instagram is still kind of a world that hasn't been conquered in terms of legal rights. I think a lot of people wish it was different, but Instagram is such a free-for-all, and I'm really allowed to do whatever I want on there. Sometimes the magazine will say you can only share the photos that we chose as our selects, but I only know one client that requests that, so it's super, super open. Hey, Michael.
So it's pretty clear how well prepared you are for these shoots, between your reference boards and your history of, or your research of past shoots, and you bring like such a level of professionalism to it and preparation. I'm curious on the flip side, you know, you're shooting a lot of very in high demand people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you send any of your reference board inspirations?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, would you like to, or do you think that the kind of like unfiltered emotion of the moment adds to the end result?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, great question. The question is, I'm doing a lot of preparation. What does it look like on their end? Like, would it be ideal if I was sending references prior to them getting there and kind of having more of a creative exchange before the shoot takes place? And maybe just how much preparation are they doing on their end? And it totally depends on the subject. Sometimes they will want to have a call beforehand. Sometimes they want to know my ideas and I have to send a mood board in advance. Sometimes with these very well-known people, they'll sit down and say that they studied my website beforehand, which is so crazy to think that they were on their laptop looking at my website. Just such a reminder that I need to keep that updated. But I love when they show that amount of interest and care prior to the shoot. I really like that back and forth. It also helps to be able to relay wardrobe ideas, because so often, I mean, with something like this, it doesn't really matter what he's wearing, but so often they'll show up in something really eccentric, and it's of course very distracting to see patterns or bright colors. This is a great example too of just a really good stylist, or it's probably just his personal clothes. But that can really dictate a photo being good or bad. So if I'm able to talk with them beforehand and talk through different wardrobe ideas, that helps enormously. So any connection with them prior to the shoot, I really, really appreciate, and I wish that happened more. But typically, the shoot is one of many, and it's not something that they have time for or care enough about to talk about before.
Yeah, we have time for one more question.
Okay. Uncle Rob.
All right, you talk about anxiety during shoots. Nobody likes to go through that.
Yeah.
Why do you do it? Where's the passion? How do you draw from that?
So no one likes to feel anxiety and be anxious. Where is the passion, and where do I draw that from? During my photo editing years at Time, I was commissioning a lot of the portrait shoots, and I was constantly having to reinvent the wheel with portraiture. And in doing so, and in spending the 2 years at Time, it felt like a place that really celebrated people. I think it was a different type of journalism that I experienced at The New Yorker. And at Time, just with every cover shoot, it was just like you're on the cover of Time because you've done something so momentous, and we're gonna celebrate you through this shoot. And I really loved that approach to photography, and with everything that I do, I think the biggest purpose I find is just through celebrating people. And I think that that's what makes the anxiety and just all of the intensity and hecticness worth it, because at the end of the day, a good photo of someone in the way in with this level of exposure just feels like the ultimate way of being able to draw attention to what someone's doing and give them the limelight. And so I think that speaks to maybe why I'm feeling even more motivated to work with people that don't necessarily have this exposure elsewhere. But I really think of what I do as just being a way of being able to celebrate people and connect with them. So sometimes that happens, sometimes in terms of the exchange and the photo turning out well, other times it doesn't, but at my core, that's what feels like is driving me day to day with this.
Yeah, do you sell prints of your work?
Feel free to contact me on my website.
There you go.
That was a great last question, actually. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing not only your beautiful work, but your philosophy and your behind-the-scenes stories. I'm sure we could all sit here for much longer and hear many more stories from you, but so well deserved. Congratulations on your award, and thank you so much for being with us. So, thank you, Thea. Breakfast at Blake will take a brief hiatus over the winter months, and so we won't have another one until Thursday, March 13th. And if you're here, you're probably on the mailing list, but just watch for news from Blake, and we look forward to seeing you then. So have a great holiday season, and we'll see you back in the spring. Thank you.